the end of the summit, and we're going to, I've asked, Jack Dangermond is coming back, and Carl Steinitz is going to join us, as well as Shannon McElvaney, who, without whom this summit also wouldn't have happened. Shannon really put together the speakers, and if you want to join me up here, what we thought we would do would be to engage all of you in a conversation about the summit, what you liked, what you didn't like, but especially where you would like to see this go. I know some of you have told me in the breaks that you wish there were 1,000 or 2,000 people here rather than 300. And so some conversation about how to build this and grow this, I think, would be great. Welcome.
I don't know on which couch to sit. This is safer, I think.
No. Oh, Shannon. Jeez.
I think that makes me feel
yeah. So, what are your thoughts about what you've heard the last 2 days?
6. I've been to the mall, and this one is very different and much better than the rest. But there are reasons, and that's really quite important. First of all, it's the most diverse, but it's not diverse enough. Too many landscape architects, not enough scientists. The relationship between the people who assess, evaluate, and contribute ideas to synthesis is imbalanced. We don't have enough people who really understand the world, and the people who synthesize without that fail. So this is really important, that we need to have more people who are engaged in changing the world in practical terms, but who come from the sciences. Mm-hmm. And I think that's important. We have the benefits of 4 years of networking. And for example, I really, really appreciate Keith's presentation, because on the one hand, you show us what you've done, but you talked about what didn't work. And I think that involves confidence. That means, it's really important to know about what not to do, because nobody's going to repeat what you did. And I think more of us in making presentations should talk about what doesn't work rather than does work.
I think it's both the technical and theoretical
it's
level.
It's both on every level.
I really appreciated what Keith said about
I really appreciated
conceptual
that.
approaches as well as, okay, this
absolutely, absolutely. It's what did you have to think about? Where were the problems? What didn't work? What didn't work? And we don't need to be impressed by graphics. We're beyond that point now. The other thing is the perception of people is different over these 4 years. I mean, I think more people understand that there are serious issues, mm-hmm. and that the scales of geodesign, if you will, but on the one hand, the science, on the one hand, the design, on the one hand, the technology, but on the one hand, what the people say. The perception of seriousness requiring major change and major projects at scale is very different 4 years.
It's worth pausing.
Yeah.
Because I think at the very first conference you spoke mm-hmm. about the seriousness of the context.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
Totally right.
It's always
been
good. Like a little dark cloud over my head.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
World's going to hell.
Yeah. But we heard that from Janine, too. I mean, Janine was quite a wake-up call as well. Well, and as was Kanjan Yu.
I think the first time you came to Redlands, you said, I can't worry about all of those things. Yeah. I remember it.
That's 30 years ago.
It's 30 years ago, but I've got to work on my methodology. And it's always been something that stayed with me, because the cloud keeps getting bigger and the context is more worrisome for me. So yeah, do you share this seriousness?
Well, I think most people do.
I mean,
it's not just us. I mean, it's
not just us.
It's broad in the land.
And I think you bringing it out is important, because you are, to me, the hope. Yeah. I don't really see politicians getting us out of it. Yeah. I don't see, who else is going to do it other than people who are actively engaged in the transactions of design and change.
I don't see it that way. I think that our role is to provide model experiences so that politicians see what works, and then they'll be forced by popular demand to make bigger changes.
I
think the
go along
Hempstead
with that.
example is a good example. If you make the Hempstead project work, then Roslyn will follow, okay? And
Good footprints.
it's good footprints, and that's risk. That's risk that all of us take professionally. I mean, we all do that. But that's only 200, 300 people. And maybe if you add the Chinese version, the European version, and you've got... Kungjan and I had lunch 4 years ago, and I asked him to make a number of how many people who understand geodesign, basically around my model, not your models, my model. How many people do you need? And he came up with a number, and I came up, and we wrote it, and we both had 10,000 right now. Right now, you could find 10,000 jobs for people who can do the kind of stuff in some mix that's going on right now. Okay. Now, that to me says the leverage is education and model projects. So you can work on Singapore, I'll work on Ohio State. Okay? I'm serious.
As a university.
No. As I decided 10 years ago, I no longer wanted to teach students. I wanted to teach teachers, and that's what I'm doing. Because every one of those has 30, and every one of those has 30, and every one has 30. Yeah. And I think that's important. That's why I think what Kellyanne did and what Shannon did in setting up, the academics, the deans, the chairman, the active teachers, many of them were here a day before. And we've been doing that every year.
Every year.
And we're sharing experiences. Some people are experimenting and what works, what doesn't work. Why is this an obsolete way of teaching? Why not do this? And that's very, very important from my experience. I also think the research and development piece is important, which is not just your company, but lots of companies. I'm an honorary professor at CASA at UCL. I see what's going out there about big data by a lot of people who don't know what they're doing except managing big data, okay? And I'm a little data guy, okay? So here's my summary of this. I think we have wonderful tools for people who are confident, sometimes overly confident, that they know what they're doing at the level of the sketch pencil. I think we have very good visualization tools. At the other end, and we saw Bart Johnson's presentation, we have very good tools for agent-based models. We have very good tools for rule-based, the structure of rule-based systems. They can get more subtle and more complicated. I see the void in the middle, which I talked about Tuesday night. I think that the core of geodesign is going to be systems thinking, leading to systems assessment, leading to systems-driven projects as options, leading to synthesis for change, putting the pieces together, leading to feedback iteratively, leading to hill climbing, and then stopping and saying, that's what I can do at this scale. Now let's go down to a pencil and paper analog, and now let's go down to an agent-based model for regional transportation.
Check it out.
And start in the middle and go outward. Don't start small and don't start big. Start in the middle and go outward. And there are no tools that manage that well right now. Okay? And those tools are easy to make. Not difficult to conceptualize, easy to make. The pieces exist, but they're not integrated. And so when Keith talks about master planning, I think that's where the problem is. I'm not sure his city is in the right place. Okay? And the idea that you have a systems orientation that gets you the basic strategy, and then a rule-based structure that knows why the rules are there in the first place, then you've got a possibility. And that's where I see it probably in a year, okay? And then you need a hell of a lot of experience. And what we ought to be doing in these conferences is having two kinds of sessions, probably mixed. Things that work and things that don't work. And the study of, I wrote a paper 30 years ago on why history should be the study of failures, not successes. And I really believe that, okay? And people should be able to talk and say openly, we're colleagues, we're friends, and at a level we're competitors, make no mistake about it. But the whole is more important than the little pieces. And I say that as an old person with a lot of experience. I don't need to start a firm.
Well, as an old person, some of your life was successful and some of it was
was
failure.
yeah.
So I think it's not fair to separate. Let's have the session on failures and
No, but mix them
because
up.
everything is success and failure.
It's a mixture.
And in fact, failure is
Sure.
success because we know something
We
about
learn.
it.
We learn it.
I think
That's the
that
feedback
kinda-
mechanism. We
that
need
kind
our
of-
own feedback.
Right. So maybe a different way to say it, Carl, would be as we make our presentations, it ain't all so good. This is where I screwed up, just
Yeah,
like
exactly. You
Keith
learn
did.
an awful lot by that.
I learned so much from that.
Yeah,
It's,
me too.
It's good.
Me too.
I thought both of our keynotes were incredible.
Yeah, exactly.
Both days. Janine and I think Kunjian has left, but they were amazing.
Yeah, so thank you.
Amazing
Yeah,
talks.
indeed.
Yes.
And I noticed a thread from last year to this year of Brand Farron's kind of call to action was thinking 250 years into the future,
A Bill of Rights for the planet. Right?
followed by this concept of a Bill of Rights for the planet, which fit very well with both Kunjian and Janine. Kunjian talking about the need for becoming friends with floods and, revitalizing our ecological infrastructure as a starting point for your constraints, which is very, very logical, and it supports both humans and life on the planet. Janine's just echoed that beautifully in this need for examples of using the genius of place in thinking, so I think both those themes tied really well together. And I keep seeing this everywhere I go. And in Europe, when we did the Geodesign Summit there, we didn't even have to explain geodesign.
Okay.
When we walked in the door, the 250 or so people that were there were on the page and 10 chapters down already. They understood it. And so I see it everywhere. The need to think about resiliency, that we're in trouble, about sustainability, and about designing in a different way. So I just keep seeing this everywhere.
But how do we bring that to scale? I mean, this is the challenge, I
That's a
think.
very real problem.
Well, you talked about the Hampstead example of
Yeah,
having a
examples.
good example. Janine mentioned when you talked this morning about a city, let's find a city and do an ecological example. Let's give some people, 3 years ago, we talked about maybe going to NSF or starting let's go for a big project that, we can't do it without the economist and the banker and the developer. And that's why I wanted Don to be here, because we're usually planning and he's implementing. He has bruises, so without all of you, it's not possible.
Well, it'll take a mosaic of things, and I think we used the analogy of mosaic in the first year we were together.
Yeah.
And we said we need to grow schools with geodesign programs. That was one of the pieces of glass. We needed to have the Singapores, we needed to have the Ohio States. We needed to work on the technology. We needed to have real life embracers of this that built little projects and big projects. We needed to fund academic research. We're not so successful at that yet. I mean, getting NSF to buy into this, they're not here this year. They were the first year. They sort of lost that. But on the other hand, the US NSF hasn't, but the Singapore NSF has. And the Chinese government is throwing money at it. And so it's going to happen. It's just not exactly how I thought it was going to happen. It's another piece of glass into the fundamental research about design and geodesign on top of that.
Right.
There was a dinner meeting on Monday night, which Shannon and I organized, of the people we knew who were here, who were deans and chairmen. And the purpose, Tom was there, the purpose was to simply say, let's figure out ways of collaborating across the schools. Yeah. And I tend to meet occasionally when I go to a university or a set of universities, a provost or somebody like that. And all these schools are stovepipe schools, and they're all looking for ways to go across. and that just falls into our hands.
Right.
And I
You
think
might share what happened at University of Minnesota.
Yeah,
Because that was an amazing event with your president and embracing it.
Well, this idea of spatializing the entire university
Yeah.
and Len Dee's work. How do we spatialize knowledge and understand it as ecosystems? So, should we also involve? We'd love to hear from all of you.
Exactly.
You've just sat through a few days,
Yeah,
and
but I think also let's ask for a few questions.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
feedback on the conference format. Did we have enough airtime, space and time, breathing time, discussion time? Or was it all talking at you too much? These are things that we need to, in the few minutes that we remain, how about next year? What do you want? What do you not want? Yeah.
could we have engaged you more? I mean, you're all so knowledgeable. There's a question here. Wait for the mic.
Yeah, I have a comment in that the engagement time outside and the breaks and things like that, the lunchtime was really valuable, but it was really hard to find necessarily the other people that you would like to meet and talk with.
What would you suggest?
I'd suggest something that is closer to maybe like a 1 hour period where you can do something closer to one of the food camp or wear camp things where you suggest a topic and you see who shows up for it. Kind of, anarchy, but, it's kind of a place to collect, if it's not raining, we could be, it could just be outside at a courtyard or something like that.
Okay, good idea. You going to capture these, or who's going to capture them?
it's on video, I hope.
Good. Yeah, it's on video.
We're all being
Okay, good idea. Yes.
Another one over.
I responded very much to the perception I had of your urgency about this, and there's so many people here that we really need to collaborate. Somehow, I'm in like a master list of who we are, so that we can
That's a very
communicate
good
with each
idea.
other would be really critical.
Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody agree to
Yeah.
share
Is that
your
okay
name
to
and
share
email
your-
and stuff? Anybody who doesn't want that?
Well, let us know. But
Yeah. Okay.
yeah.
And actually, the interesting, there's half the people here are new, and there have been 3 meetings before, so there's at least twice as many people who have been involved and are involved in one way or another.
And yet, I think Janine's observation, we are really a community. I mean, this is a community, people, so we do need to share.
Okay.
Others?
Yes.
Uh-oh.
A thought about possibly looking at sociological aspects, and here we're following, in a sense, talking about how to deal with the growth of cities. And there were some allusions to there maybe humans might interact better on smaller scale rather than in a large city. We're talking about, say, maybe a downtown core. So maybe there could be some perspectives on trying to reverse that, in a sense, taking a leadership role, even though we're just one small group, in maybe geodesign could include it might be considered social engineering, but looking at maybe making villages, smaller towns, reasons for people to move to places like that, or to maintain rural, as opposed to, say, in China, where I get the impression that rural is losing out at a great pace.
Well, we're urbanizing so rapidly right now, and figuring out a way to do that right.
The World Bank no longer recognizes the distinction between urban and rural. They're dealing with urban regions and dealing with the relationships of the built, denser part with the services provided by the agriculture, the water production, the air quality of the not built part. And I think focusing on the word cities is a mistake.
Yeah, they're ecosystems.
They're ecosystems at a larger scale than most cities. And even the Shanghais and the Mexico cities depend on their territory.
One thing that I was struck with in this conference was the scores, the score idea. The park score led to discussions about an ecological score for a city. I mean, or a health score for a city, or a livability score for a city. And I think what we heard was this comparative analysis intrigues people, it's motivating. And taking the methodology of what Trust for Public Lands did, and also with Green Score.
Be careful. There's a very large literature on the National Environmental Index from the 1960s and why it failed. And I know, without being pejorative to the Trust for Public Lands, which I respect enormously, I know I can develop a score in which Fresno comes first and Minneapolis last.
Yeah.
Sunshine on baseball fields per capita.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay? So, and Dave Tulloch made a very important comment. I mean, are we really one country when it comes to deciding what a good park system is? And if not, how many countries are we? Which is the right question. And there's a whole literature on the concept of regionalization and on what basis you develop regions and what diversity you accept in a large country. And I think those are issues that were debated and written about in the 50s and 60s when I was a student. And now's the time to implement them because they weren't implemented in those days. And those things are coming back. And that's a literature that people should go right back to.
There's somebody up here.
I think if we want to reach a lot of large audience, the media is probably the best way to get to that.
Yeah.
If any of these cities is being created using the geodesign, probably presenting that in Good Morning America or any of these programs within these big cities is going to reach a lot of people. How many of you have heard about timeshare? People who work free for someone and then they bank those timeshares and then they can use them with other people.
Yeah,
Bitcoin is coming, another way of
I think you would be good on
sharing
TV,
that.
Carl. You should really be on Good Morning America. It would be good. You could be a star. I like this idea.
Well, actually, one idea that Davis and I were talking about to scale up is to have a television show on geodesign, which would be like CSI, but instead of solving the crime of why the person died,
Let's design Saudi Arabia.
who killed the ecosystem, who extinguished this species, and
It's all a plot.
I believe Brain Games would be interested in that.
yeah. So we might think about that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I also think that there's a leapfrogging opportunity. I think most of the practical current interest in geodesign is in Europe and America, where the institutions are relatively stable and safe, but the real need isn't there. The real need is in Africa and in Central America and in South America and in places where, why does Barbados have the highest investment? Because they didn't have the infrastructure in the first place.
Yeah.
Okay, so you have the possibility of leapfrogging what you teach professionals and how they operate and how they design the systems for managing their growth, taking into account the failure of the generation that we are, in a sense. And I think that that's the real opportunity. And I think that the schools, why the hell go to Harvard? You need to build the institutions in Montevideo. You need to build this in Budapest. You need to build the institutions in places where the real problems are. And that's hard, but more of us should be doing it.
What did you think about Janine's idea of a BIS along with GIS, a biological information system?
I don't make the distinction.
Yeah. I agree.
Okay. Mm-hmm. They should be
totally agree.
completely wedded together. Mm-hmm.
Social information is inside of a GIS, and biological information in GIS, hydrological. These
you
are
had
all the parameters of geography.
You had 3 talks this year which had subtexts which were not present previously. And that is over-complexity. And the need to take something that is complex, which we recognize as complex, maybe too complex, and yet act within it in a way that ordinary people understand, including us as ordinary people. That's a really interesting problem. And how much time does it take? There were 3 presentations on short-timeness. Mm-hmm. And then there were a couple of presentations of 5-year projects of great research. And the balance between those and at what work, where are the pressures on us, and at what level do we simplify, and how do we feel confident about our simplifications? Those are going to be the next generation of psychological issues in geodesign. And I think we ought to be starting to think about that really seriously.
So I think we have a question back here and
How
then
much
one over
data
here.
do you need is the question.
So go ahead.
I have a quick question. Just a small observation on my part was, this is my first geodesign conference. I work for the Cape Cod Commission. We came last year and actually talked a little bit last year too. And so some of the same sentiments were expressed to me last year after they came back, and we were just curious. It seems like there's very few government officials here at these conferences, and maybe I'm wrong, and I just didn't contact or see you through my groupings. But it seems like there's a lot of private industry here, and there's a whole lot of academic here, which is great. But I don't see a whole lot of just government people. So I didn't know if any of the four of you might have some ideas on maybe why government hasn't shown up to these guys yet.
How many are from the government here? Can you just show of hands? Do we have one,
He's right.
2, 3, 4,
Five,
5,
six.
Right.
6? So a handful. We have a handful. Yeah.
So we
the,
had
the first couple of years, we had many more
Yeah.
from federal government,
Yeah.
Army Corps, EPA,
Yeah.
USGS.
travel restrictions have been a big issue.
At the federal level particularly.
Yeah, and even our local, there's
The other
folks that-
issue is design a major field in government practice or public service. They often outsource design to accomplish projects ranging anywhere from landscape to buildings to plans to.
Yeah.
So it is an engagement of the private sector, and the academy is the foundation for creating designers.
Yeah, but you've got to develop a core of clients who
Yeah.
know to ask for what they know they should ask for.
In contrast to that, if we look at the general GIS community, 60–70% of GIS users are government-based.
Yeah.
They're public servants, and they collect data, they manage data, they analyze data, they do make decisions. The gap that seems to be there is they're not moving into design.
I agree.
And I think that's the real opportunity that I was talking with John Jen on Monday about this, or Tuesday. One approach is this top-down, educating everybody, getting everybody to understand this thing. And he was sort of pointing out that technology has a role, because technology is the thing that actually becomes pervasive first.
Yep.
And this has certainly been my career, is building a product that ships in volume made a difference, because people would buy it, they would adopt it, they would learn the methods as they purchased this technology and adjusted it. So the concept I've always had is that we build geodesign on top of or in association with, in other words, bring the methods into the technology. So the technology goes out to several million people. Bang, they start to use it for agriculture, for engineering, for all sorts of things, because it shows up on their screen. Right. There's a structured methodology that shows up on their screen. They begin to use it just like we did with email, or like we did with CAD, or like we did with other database technologies. So for me, this pervasive spreading has something to do with the magic of building it as a product shipping in volume.
Yeah, but even your company is built on industry-based silos.
Sure.
And the realization that those silos have to get together is of equal, if not superior, importance than the sustenance of those.
It's a really...
And it's a structuring of our society
Yeah.
that's present and that's not present.
It's something that's going on in my mind almost constantly, because people that buy the GIS technology, they're vertical.
I know.
Often, or we talk about them in the business domain, the forester, the
Exactly.
water guy, the
Exactly.
science person.
Exactly.
But there is this other part of our community, and you've seen it at the conference.
I know.
They're GIS users, and they are the GIOs. The first GIO in the world happens to be in the audience. That's Karen Siderellis. She was the first GIO in the federal government in Department of Interior. And her job, or the concept of a GIO, is to take the multiple departments and feather them together like a accounting system does for all the different, ERP sorts of functions in an organization. So I realize that it's the business function that attracts people and makes them excited by it. But there is this other enterprise GIS dimension or culture that actually exists and is emerging. How we play out geodesign is intriguing, because which of those two do we go with? Well, you got to go with the mission first off, because the engineer designing da-da-da-da-da-da, or the planner designing da-da-da-da-da-da, is going to do it in the mission space. But there is a kind of GIO IT person that if we got to and wired them into the understanding that geographic design is a cross-cutting thing on their cross-cutting databases, we could do some interesting, it's a new kind of career. It's a geodesigner at the enterprise level. That's kind of like a strategic planner or somebody who really knows about the workflows and decision-making across the organization.
I think what's going to happen is that people are going to force their government to perform, and that the private sector will diminish in importance, and that government will reemerge as the enterprise which is responsible for geodesign.
And what level?
States, counties, and Europe watersheds, because it's mandated by the EU.
It's interesting.
And that the incompetence, not by the personal incompetence, but by the institutional support incompetence of what used to be called the state planner, the county planner, the city planner, is going to come back. And that NGOs can't do that because they're not elected and they're not the king.
Yeah.
And I think that that's going to happen in the next generation.
So I have a question.
And that's where the 10,000 people are going to be.
I have a question about that, Carl. I mean, you know our friend Werman?
I do.
He always talks about the movement from nation states to city states.
Right.
What's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I agree. I think that the big cities are now too big to be in the legal bounds of where they were. London is no longer London, it's London Metro, right? The District Federal is surrounded by its city.
Moscow represents 40% of Russia's economy. So should it split off? Will it become a city-state if you look out?
Who knows? Our state boundaries are only 300 years old, for God's sakes. And you know, we have the Walloons fighting with the Flemish, and those boundaries are going to change. They do. It's slow, but even then, cooperation among units, which are sort of artificial and out of date in many cases, is imperative because the people in it operate as a unit, and they know that. So, the balance between top down and bottom up is some things don't work bottom up. You don't build a regional water system bottom up. You don't build a transportation system bottom up. You can build houses and gardens bottom up, but not some things.
Well,
and
Dan can build developments bottom up.
Well,
but they need to have an infrastructure plan.
Well, that's right.
Around them.
And that's why if you can think about things operating at their own scale and have not one base map, but not one project-oriented evaluation, but what does that do there and there and there, or from there to there to there? At least go up one scale and go down one scale in the evaluation. It's much more complicated in terms of analysis and complexity and feedback. But by gosh, when at the level of change in the last decade, who knows that that's not going to be done in 5 years?
Yeah. We had a question over here. Right, go ahead.
I love the intimacy of this conference. So in some ways, the scaling part scares me a little bit because. But I wonder, putting a couple things together, the 50,000 people that watched the Chinese geodesign, but they watched, they didn't participate.
They may have just turned it on and said no and turned it off.
Right. And then this morning, Janine's story of the hike, of the experiential going to the sacred place. Right. I mean, what about a bunch of small nodes out there, or smaller nodes, that participated somehow. I mean, obviously we couldn't have 10,000 WebEx, webinars up on the screen at the same time, but some way to capture that, to capture the spirit of place, as well as to bring the ideas together, build a large story map or something. So.
I think what's been going on here is a conversation, and you guys are certainly invited to take this conversation and do with it as you wish. I think that's actually the way technology gets and ideas get disseminated. So having your own geodesign summit at your own place and university, it's just got to happen, right? I mean, aren't you planning to do that anyway?
And
how
the
many of you
YouTube stuff.
let me just ask the question. How many of you are going to take geodesign back to your space and talk about it or have some event or share it?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, well,
And
I think that's one of the concepts we had 4 years ago.
4 years ago, exactly. And the YouTube stuff is really important.
Yeah.
I mean, all of this stuff is on YouTube.
Would you like us to put all this on YouTube? Okay, so you could access every one of these talks, right?
Right.
Okay, we'll do that.
Yeah, good. But it's been that way. It's been that way in the past. You just go in.
Yeah, by the way, it's already there.
It's already there.
Sorry, I just thought I'd...
Yeah.
Do we have another question? Do you have the mic? Oh.
To take, to make our own geo summit somewhere else, perhaps there's a toolkit that you could create, some sort of synopsis or some kind of talking points.
So
Maybe from the videos. I mean, use those. I think the point is look, we should really acknowledge Shannon. He's been working his ass off for several years. Should we do that for right now? And all the team around him, like Bill Miller and
Jenny.
Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah,
the
Jenny.
real people. But we just make it up, right? So could you. In fact, the dimensions of it are such that you just take it and start thinking about it and get collective people together and start talking about it and holding a conversation.
And come back and say what happened.
A sacred geodesign grove here.
Yeah. There's no sort of TED mantra that has to go on here. Take it and go.
Yeah.
You can start your own geodesign X.
Right.
We have another point here.
3 quick comments on format. I thought that, the choice of keynotes is always really important, and I thought that having someone such as Janine, who is not necessarily a geodesign person who does this, but who brings other perspectives is really important. Might be somebody in land use law and tenure, anthropology, though they do use geodesign, sociology, something along those lines. To inspire us to be thinking along those lines is really important. I think the idea of the breakout at some point, the opportunity to meet with people who have common interests that don't just self-identify by walking into each other in the hall. And finally, I love the geodesign meets Johnny Carson couch conversations. These are extraordinary to have because it's relaxed.
Johnny's
Thank
pretty
you.
good.
It's easy.
Tom.
We've got great people. No. That's fine. It's all of you. It's really great.
That's a heavy load to carry. I always
Well,
feel guilty.
Come on, he's been a dean for 23 years. This is easy.
Another question.
My turn now?
Yes, yeah, Christina, go ahead.
Hi. So it's been very interesting to be here, especially since I'm an engineer and never thought about the planning process at all. But I'm still hung up on Keith Bassaron's talk on all the parameters and then City Engine being a tool that so far it simulates buildings, right? But I see the need based on that talk that soon we'll be generating infrastructure based on rules and planning zones based on rules. So, and this is all parametric stuff, right? So I'm picturing myself plugging in the computer and pressing some parameters and poof, a city with everything gets generated automatically. But the question for you guys is, we're going towards the idea of building cities and environments that are sustainable and healthy and energy efficient and all that. Those metrics are not right now tied to these parameters that would run the model. Do you see that happening at some point? Is that something we can start thinking, look, Barcelona looks like this. This matches these parameters. And this is this type of, it has these metrics for sustainability and walkability, so that when we have these tools in place, maybe we can start building models based on sustainability parameters instead of just numerical parameters about
Absolutely.
how this looks.
Yeah. I mean, there's nothing in the actual technology framework to limit it.
And
You can define anything in it with any rule set that you have. It involves creating rules. So it's in its infancy, this whole parametric design platform. So I would encourage you strongly to start playing around with it and extend it. Because it's only a couple years old, by the way.
The people who are using the technologies see as a benefit working faster. But those are the people who need to study history the longest. Okay? Because they still need to know whether things are going well or not well. And that's based on experience. And it could be dangerous. So just, you always have to worry. A wise, no longer living colleague of mine once said, you can't hurry time. You can design fast, but you don't necessarily have to say, let's go do it right away. And that there's a caution. There has to be a caution that sits on top of all of the things that we perceive to be benefits. So if you say Barcelona, well, let's figure out the rules of Barcelona, but are we going to do it in Peru? Are we going to do it in China? Are we going to do it in Sri Lanka? Are we going to do it in Nigeria? We could, but should we? Right? And we have to keep those issues on the table.
Yes, Mike.
I take the mic holder's prerogative.
There you go.
So that last question brings up, and your responses bring up the question of bioregionalism yet again.
Absolutely.
And another observation I had in looking at the rules, and I don't know, it's somewhat anecdotal from this conference, but there was a huge amount of focus on water in this conference across many different cultures.
Right.
And one of the things I noticed is in none of the City Engine rule sets that were presented was there actually cross-system integration in the rule formulation for the generative design part. On the output side, yes, right? We've all got the triple bottom line output thing, but what about cross-system
generation?
Exactly. Generative typologies.
Exactly.
We're going to have to do that in Singapore.
Yep.
Yeah.
Be a good place to try it. Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm not joking. Yeah. It's exactly what we must do.
Yeah.
You put in a building, what's the traffic out of the building, but then what is the effect on the traffic in a transportation model that's already running? How does it affect that network? Same with water, same with every other system.
Right.
Yeah. It's just beginning.
Do we have another one? Paul?
Yeah, it is just a beginning, and as an example, one of the questions I asked early on with City Engine was, when it puts out the parameters for the building, and you get X number of square feet of commercial opportunity, can you reverse that and go, we only need X number of square feet in commercial opportunity here. Now the building, the designer is now in control of the parameters, not the reverse in just one example. And I think that's what a lot of people are beginning to ask.
I think it changes the conversation. As I was saying to Janine this morning, when you come in and you're proposing something and it performs incorrectly and you can do it in real time, the conversation between the public authority and the developer changes. Yeah. So let's just lower a few floors of this building and, oh, okay, now it's acceptable. Or the public authority says, we need to increase tax revenue, therefore we need 3 floors of commercial instead of 2. Oh, now it's back in balance. So it may not be optimizing, but it will change the conversation.
Yeah, and it'll change the conversation for the
designer.
designer.
Here's my proposal, and it goes through 3 months of malarkey to a decent conversation between everybody participating. In that sense, Dan, I loved your Don, I loved your analogy of let's get it all together. And if you had this interactive way of holding a community forum where you're really designing with them rather than being at the effect of this or the constraint of that, it will change the conversation.
And I want to say just one comment, okay? I was incredibly moved by Janine's presentation. It was just unbelievable. But I was also incredibly moved by what happened on the couches right after that. I honestly believe, Jack, that was an aha moment. At some point in time, somewhere along the way, somebody's going to point back to what just happened there and go, this was an aha moment in geodesign. So congratulations, I think.
Yes. Well,
We have one last task.
we have one last test to announce the 2 prize winners.
Yeah.
Right? Yes, for the lightning talks. Do we have those?
So-
Well, we're going to have this again next year, aren't we?
Yes.
I hope so.
How many of you will come? Most of you, okay.
And
Tell your
spread the
friends.
word.
But it's going to be in Barcelona, isn't it?
Okay, good.
I'll do a
there
WebEx
will-
from there. That's where I'll be.
Sometime in September, there will be a European summit.
Yes.
And Kungjan, we had one in China about 3 or 4 months ago, and that's under discussion as well. There is one in Japan next week in Tokyo. Those things are happening.
It's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
24th? I see.
So Shannon, do you have the winners?
That's where I'm going to go after that summit. Okay. Yeah, so for the first lightning round, and not very surprising because this guy is awesome, but Ryan Perkle.
Yeah. Where's Ryan? Oh, there you are, Ryan. Congratulations.
Come down here. Yeah, thank you. And your students.
Yeah.
And marrying those libraries to what Janine has to do. And then the second winner was Brendan Harmon.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And his team. Where's Brendan?
Yeah. Where's Brendan?
Is he? I can't see him. Is he here?
Come on.
Are you saying we should go to the party already? Yeah. So, but another great presentation from North Carolina. So I just want to thank everybody who, I felt really bad. I had to reject about 20 abstracts, and not because I wanted to, but because we just didn't quite have enough space for breakouts this year. So next year, I'm looking for featured speakers, and I'm looking for speakers of all kinds. So please send me your suggestions. It's one of the hardest parts of the job is finding talent to come and speak and share. So please put out the message ahead of time for us.
Well, thank you again, Shannon. This wouldn't happen without you. Thank you, Jack and Carl. It's been an honor to be on stage with all of you.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, well,
Say it for Tom.
and
That's
thank
hard work.
you. Great audience. Great audience.